Hello, I'm Joshua of Milestone Play, and today we're going to be looking at the Power Rangers Roleplaying Game. I had a player approach me about wanting to try the game, but it was a little unapproachable. It was a new system that they didn't know, and they couldn't find any online resources to really walk them through everything. So I figured not only would I help them out, but I'd help all of you out as well. So we're going to be going through and introducing most of the game, and get it in a spot where you guys, even if you don't want to put a lot of effort in, at least know the basics to then begin playing the game yourself and seeing what you think about it as opposed to what someone else can tell you about it. So, in this video, we're going to go through an introduction to the Essence 20 system, the core system that the Power Rangers game is built on. We're going to go through and create a character together, that way you can see what that process is like. We're then going to go through a bunch of the basic rules of what to expect in your first game. Most of it's going to be combat, that way you can go to the table knowing what to expect. And then finally, we're going to break down some of the problems of the game. This game does have a chunk of problems in the edit of the rulebook, so hopefully by breaking through all of those down, you will be able to better parse out some of the problems that you'll have reading the book yourself and make it more approachable. So, let's get into this. I will be jumping back and forth through the rulebook, the FAQs, and our character sheet as we go through this. So, let's start off this introduction to the Power Rangers role-playing game by looking at its core system, the Essence 20 system. The game is structured around its 4 Essence scores: Strength, Speed, Smarts, and Social. These serve as the main ability scores of the game, but they don't directly affect any of the dice rolls that you'll be doing. Instead, they factor into your character sheet in a handful of different ways. First, each essence has an associated defense score: toughness for strength, evasion for speed, willpower for smarts, and cleverness for social. When an enemy or danger tries to hurt your character, it rolls against one of those defense scores. These defenses start at 10 plus your associated essence score, but can increase when morphed into a Power Ranger based on what abilities your character has. Your essence scores can also be damaged, lowering them and therefore your defenses. While your health, like in other games, determines whether or not you are defeated, an essence score dropped to 0 brings penalties, from debuffs to all rolls to being completely comatose and not getting to play until the score's back up to 1. The most prominent rule in the game that is based on an essence score that you won't see on your character sheet is that your speed score affects how many actions you get to take on your turn in combat. The game splits actions up into move actions, standard actions, and free actions. Move actions don't have to be used to move, standard actions aren't the default standard action, and free actions aren't free. So, I will talk more on this in the Gameplay Essentials section after we make a character, but the speed score's impact on how many actions you get is definitely something players should know when making their character. You will want to start with a minimum of a 2 in speed, but you probably don't need 5 or more unless you're playing a speed skill-focused character. The final major use of the essence scores is to serve as categories for skills. Your score in every essence category will determine how many total skill ranks and specializations you have in that category. Let's break down what all of that means. Every dice roll your character makes in this game will be based on a skill. The 20 part of the Essence 20 system is because this is a D20 system. When you want to do something risky or with variable success, you are going to roll a d20 in a skill test, wanting to roll higher than a difficulty number set by the present challenge or by an enemy's defenses. These difficulties range from 5 and 10 for extremely simple and routine tasks, up to 25 and 30 for formidable and nearly impossible tasks. When rolling a skill test, you will also get to add a skill die if you are trained in the associated skill. Instead of adding a flat +2 or +10 like in other RPGs, the Essence 20 system uses a skill ladder that has you roll the d20 plus another die depending on your level of training. The lowest level of training a character can have is a d2. As you get better at that skill, the die increases in size up to a d6, a d8, d10, and finally a d12. In addition to training a skill up to a better skill die, you can also gain specializations in a skill. In order to specialize, you must at least have the basic level of training in that skill, the D2 level. Specializations focus on a narrower category in that skill. For example, you could specialize the athletic skill into swimming, or the driving skill into motorcycles, or the culture skill into history. While the Essence 20 system is designed to let you make up any specializations that fit your character and your group's game, they do have suggestions for all of the skills for the Power Rangers Roleplaying Game. But what does specialization get you? When you make a skill test using your specialization, you roll the d20 and your skill die is normal, but you also get to roll every skill die underneath. You then get to add the highest value on a skill die to the d20. While you're only adding a single die to the d20, it kind of buffers that die up. So if you're rolling a d20 plus a d8 and you have specialization, you also get to roll a d6, a d4, and a d2. If the d8 only lands on a 3, but either the d6 or d4 is higher, you get to use that bonus instead. If specialization allows you to roll the dice under it, why would anyone choose to specialize a skill when they only have a d2 in it? While waiting for a d4 or a d6 may seem better, you can still benefit from the specialization because of dice shifts. Many abilities in the game, as well as situations in your story, may call for one or more dice shifts. A dice shift changes what level of skill die a player gets to use on a roll, and a bunch of dice shifts can add together to climb up and down the skill ladder. There are even categories outside of your normal training levels that let you roll multiple dice, guarantee success or critical success, or on the other hand, can cause you to automatically fail or fumble a roll. So, while you may only have a D2 in a skill, if you have other abilities that allow you to get one or more dice shifts, that specialization can still come up. In addition to dice shifts on the skill die, the D20 can also be affected by edges and snags. An edge lets you roll 2 d20s and take the better. A snag forces you to roll 2 d20s and take the lower value. Edges and snags cancel each other out on a 1-for-1 basis, and most of the time you can only be affected by one of each. There are some abilities in the game that allow for multiple edges on a single roll. They're called extra edge, but they are not the norm by any means. The most common snag you will encounter in the game is attempting an untrained skill test. Remember how a D2 is the lowest level of training you can have? Well, if you don't have that training, you not only don't get a bonus on the roll, but you actually have to roll twice and take the lesser value. While a D2 may not seem like a big bonus, the more important part of that first level of training is that it prevents the snag for being untrained. It's important to note that dice shifts do not change if you are trained or untrained in a skill. You can be trained up to a D4, suffer 2 dice shifts down to a base die, a single D20 level, but that does not give you a snag. On the other hand, you can be untrained in a skill, have 5 dice shifts up to a D10, but you still get the snag for being untrained. When running the game, game masters are encouraged to leave edges and snags to the rules of the game, and instead use the dice shifting mechanic to apply situational bonuses to any rolls the players have based on the story. While the snag for being untrained is pretty bad, there are some character options, such as the Origin Athletic, that protect you from this untrained snag for entire Essence categories. There are a few more basic items we should talk about on the character sheet before we make a character, so those options make some sense. As stated earlier, health determines how much damage you can take before being defeated in a combat. There are a few ways to heal scattered through character abilities, but in the end, a new day is the easiest means to get full health. The story may not always have time for that though, so you're going to want to kind of watch your health carefully. Movement is how far your character can move in battle when they use their actions to move. Your base movement is determined by your origin, not your speed score. While a high speed score may give you more actions to buy small amounts of additional movement on your turn, your origin has more control over your movement rate than your speed score. Personal power is a mana or endurance system that determines how often you can do some of your special abilities unique to your character. At the start of an adventure, you start with your maximum capacity based on your ranger's role, level, and what other abilities you have. Each day that passes, you will regenerate some spent personal power. The amount regained is based on your role. There are a very few ways to regain personal power in the middle of the day. The Black Ranger has an 11th level ability to spend their own personal power to allow their companions to regain some. Aside from any items or story moments that your game master may choose to develop for this game, the only other option is to spend story points. Unlike personal power, story points are a group resource for the table. The table starts each session with 1 story point per character. There is a list of abilities the players can use story points for. We've already mentioned the one that allows you to regain personal power. In addition, there's also abilities such as re-rolling 1s on dice, buying specialization on a roll, buffing defenses, and even adding in story elements to help the characters push the game forward. There are some abilities or plot-relevant game effects that may require story points as well. In addition to the story points given to you at the top of the session, the table can earn more story points by fumbling rolls, going through exciting scenes, or having great ideas that amplify the game. Certain features such as the Origin Comedic also have unique ways of generating story points for the table. It should also be noted that the Game Master starts with the same number of story points as the players, can use them in the same way, and can also use them to activate additional abilities for their NPCs. There's a lot more to cover, but we've kind of reached the point where this stuff is only going to make more sense if we start having specific examples. Let's make a character to see how all of this starts to fall into place. Like most RPGs, the Power Rangers Roleplaying Game has a specific order it suggests you follow to make your character for the first time. Once you have a better grasp of the game, you'll want to be making your choices collectively, but we have to start somewhere. Character creation is the first major section of the rulebook, even before explaining the basics of the Essence 20 system, so their instructions don't expect you to make a hyper-optimized character. Instead, they basically ask what your character's personality is like, what color ranger you want to be, and then have you spice up that combination with some hobbies or formative experiences. You then finish out the stats and equipment. The first step the book wants us to do is have a character concept to build towards. To keep things simple, let's make a tough but grounded team leader. While the rest of the team may be a bit more lighthearted, excited to be a superhero, or specialized in a field to support the group, let's make the middleman who tries to keep the team focused. Step 2 is to choose your origin. This is like choosing your race or folk in other games, but actually has a lot more weight in your build here than in other RPGs. This choice will affect your starting health, increase, and essence score, given associated skill training, determine your base movement rate, determine starting languages known, and also give you an origin benefit. Examples of origins include athletic, curious, and popular. They are essentially high school archetypes. While athletic is tempting for our team leader, a bit of looking around shows that there's also a cynical origin as well. That seems to fit our grounded middleman personality type. Popping that in our origin slot, the first thing it gives us is a base health of 2. This is a low health game, but the flavor text of being hardened to the world and comparing it to the amount of origins that start with 1 health shows that comparatively we're starting in a good spot. We'll be able to get some more health later on. Next up, we get to increase our speed or social by +1. We don't actually know what those scores are yet. If you want to save a sticky note over to the side with this option and come back to it later, you can. But for now, we'll just pop that into speed. The book wants us to find our character as we make choices, so let's continue on. From there, we get a bonus skill. Rather, we get a skill for that essence point we just added. The rules don't explain it well. Depending on whether we chose speed or social above, we have some options to choose from to gain our first skill training up to a D2. These subdivisions of skills to choose from is meant to help us stay focused on the theme of the cynic origin and make character creation easier. The important thing is that for every point in an essence score that you have an associated training or specialty. We'll see this again in the role section. For now, we'll pick initiative out of the two options it wants us to choose from. As the focused team leader, we want to be able to swiftly lead our team into combat. We get a ground movement of 30. Some origins are lower at 25, others get all the way up to 40. 30 is a pretty common option for the ground movement. We also determine our languages known here. We get our native language and one additional language for every 3 points in smarts. Your origin determines whether this calculation is based on smarts or social, and if it is a 1-for-1 conversion, a 1-for-2, or a 1-for-3 like ours is. There are some that even have a 1 additional language for every 4 points in the stat, so it could be worse for us. Native language is left broad, with it being any language that would be in your home environment. If your backstory has you from a bilingual home or with a deaf sibling that uses ASL or some other sign language, you can have multiple languages as your native language. For simplicity, we'll just put English, and then let's put English plus 1/3 smarts as a reminder to check back later. Finally, we get our origin benefit called, oh, what now? We are so steeled against being shocked or surprised that negative emotional responses are just not really something that we give in too easily. Any attack or effect that targets us emotionally automatically suffers snag, and we have edge when trying to roll to overcome emotional distress. With this ability, we'll probably have a better chance of surviving attacks against our cleverness and willpower. All of that comes from our origin. Next up, we have our role, our spectrum color as a Power Ranger. Our role serves as our class from other RPGs. This game, while open to explore many new kinds of Power Rangers, is built off of the tropes started in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. With that, we'll want a basic idea of what kinds of abilities these roles have to help us make our team leader. Luckily, the book gives us a simple breakdown on what the roles' themes are. It is important to look a bit closer at their powers though. While the Black Ranger is sold as charming and the life of the party, all of his abilities are about helping buff the group. I really like that for our team leader. Instead of the original powerhouse red role that could handle things in a bind to take the protagonist slot, I want to have the team leader firmly connected to the rest of the team and not have that pseudo-protagonist ability. Looking at the table, we see most of what we get, but there is some additional information below, such as power progression, trainings, and grid equipment. Let's go through this piece by piece. Our personal power capacity is found in the chart. This is different than the personal power capacity progression rate listed below. Ignore those rates. They are incorrect. There is a personal power regeneration rate though, and that is correct. We will need to write that down. We will regenerate our personal power that much after a 6-hour rest. Our regen rate is 2, which we'll just have to make a note on the back page here so we don't forget. So we start by regenerating all of our personal power on a rest. There are some roles, like the Blue Ranger, that have a regen of 4. They don't even have a capacity of 4 until they level up a handful of times. So depending on our Ranger's color, you may be able to use your power points faster, knowing that they will be coming back faster as well. That said, the regen rates look to be based on how fast the capacity rises. If you care about how much you'll be able to use your power points, refer back to the color summary table and just look to see if the progression is fast, moderate, or slow. We have our personal power. Next, let's write down our armor training. This will matter when we morph and if we ever try to find armor for our human form. Next up, we get 1 starting rank in might and 2 in performance. This is because if we look back up at our chart at level 1, our strength increases by 1 and our social increases by 2. For every essence point increase, we get a skill bump in that category. The system gives us +1 might and +2 performance because the original Black Ranger used the heavier power axe, and his hobby of hip-hop dancing really plays into both of those things. The game tries to lead us in the direction of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. We could house rule to change those skills, but we'll keep that and use the performance for Captain America speeches or something along those lines. Continuing on, we get our starting equipment. The wrist communicator will be great for when the team splits up, and the power morpher for morphing, kind of the shtick here. It makes a note that the Blade Blaster and the Versatile Power Weapon are only available when morphed. The Blade Blaster can easily be found in the equipment section, and we can write down those stats. The Versatile Power Weapon is a bit harder to find. We're about to go down another big tangent like the PowerPoints, so we're just going to choose the Power Sword option because it lists 1 or 2 hands and move along. We'll come back to this point later in the final section of the video when I can fully break down about it. I mean break it down. We just have 2 things left. It's Morphin Time and Heart of the Team. Because It's Morphin Time is the same for everyone, we'll save that for last. Heart of the Team is the Black Ranger's unique ability at level 1. As a free action, we can apply a 1-up shift to the role of any ally within 60 feet of us that can understand what we're saying. This costs 1 of your quips and speeches per long rest. The writers of this game have a habit of double naming the level 1 abilities. The Black Ranger's Heart of the Team is mechanically quips and speeches in the chart. The Blue Ranger's Eureka is relabeled to idea points, and the Yellow Ranger's Triple Strike attacks becomes follow-up. Finally, we have our It's Morphin Time. This ability is the same for every single Power Ranger. Using a standard action, we can morph into our heightened state. We get a suite of automatic features as well as access to any of our power weapons and abilities that use personal power. The base features are that we get a bonus to our toughness. Because we have medium armor training, that's a +2. Additionally, our jump distance maximum is tripled. We can summon our power weapons on a free action. The last benefit Morphin gives us is the ability to prevent ourselves from being defeated when we hit 0 health. We'll elaborate on this in the Gameplay Essentials section. Finishing our role, we move on to influences. Influences range from hobbies to life experience that shaped who we are now. Influences are the smallest part of character creation, but can have a deep impact. Each influence has a perk that it gives you as well as a possible bond to help flesh out your backstory and include something or someone in your environment that may affect the group's story in the future. Every character has at least 1 influence. You are allowed to take more than 1, but for every influence you take beyond the first, you also acquire an associated hang-up. Hang-ups are like negative perks that provide limitations or debuffs to your character. Hang-ups are a great way to add depth to your character. That said, we're just going to be taking a single influence to speed things up. Influences are supposed to add some depth. Because influences are supposed to add that depth, let's go ahead and give a soft side to our cynic. Let's take the artisan influence and choose poetry as the art style. Our influence perk gives us an edge on anything poetry related in terms of performing or, maybe understanding metaphor and relations from clues found during investigation. That's already trying to stretch it for the gameplay purposes, but talk to your game master, see how it plays out. Because this is our first influence, we don't get the associated hang-up. Slowly getting towards the end of character creation, we have hit the point of finishing up our essence scores at step 5. There are 2 ways to do this. We can either have 12 points to spread between the 4 spots, or we can use the suggested spread, which is dividing them out 4, 3, 3, 2. Keep in mind, these totals are being added to the 1 point in speed we got from our origin, and the 1 and the 2 we got from our roll. Let's go with the spread. Our power sword is going to use might, so we're going to want a high strength for melee combat. We'll put the 4 there to bring that up to a total of 5. We seem to be leaning into the Black Ranger build of strength and social, so let's continue with that. Our first 3 is going to go to social to bring that up to 5 as well. Our remaining 3 and 2 can be balanced into smarts and speed. Based on our origin, that makes its 3s in both of our essence scores. We could have put the origin +1 in social, but that strays a bit too far from our middleman concept. Plus, this keeps our speed from being too low for action economy. With our essence scores finalized, we can write our defenses underneath. The first is just 10 plus the score. The morph defense score with the medium armor is now up to a 17. Bada bing, bada bang, we are already at step 6, which is determining our skills and specializations. Our essence score determines how many skills and specializations we have in each category. Because our origin and role essence bonuses come paired with their skills, we just need to choose the ones for the added in 4, 2, 3, and 3. Starting in strength, I think we want to keep those points focused on combat. While the other skills are useful, we will have a lot of non-combat skills in smarts and social, so let's spend our first 2 points in conditioning. Kind of an outlier, this skill is used to increase our health. We'll bump our 2 health up to a 4. Our third point will increase our might training up to a D4. Finally, let's use our final point for a specialization in might. Here, we need to choose whether we want to specialize in the use of our power weapons, our power sword, or if we want to specialize in martial arts. The game wants us to choose a particular flavor of martial arts, but it doesn't matter too much because you're not really going to be specializing in judo and then decide to use Greco-Roman wrestling. You know, unless you're trying to flex by preventing your specialization from working. But anyway. Power weapons sound cool, but we have to be morphed to use them. Let's specialize in judo martial arts so we can always benefit from this. We have 2 points to spend in speed and already have a rank in initiative. Let's train targeting up to a D2 in case we have to use our blade blaster at a distance. And let's put our driving to a D2 as well in case we need to get across town. Or, also in preparation for Zords in the future. Always good to look ahead at Zords. You have to wait for level 3 for them, but once again, tangent. We have 3 points in smarts to spend with nothing yet here. None of these skills are really speaking to me, so I think we should spread these 3 points out. This will reduce how many smart skills we have snags on for being untrained, just in case we find ourselves separated from the rangers good in these areas, and we need to pick up the slack. Let's go alertness, survival, and technology all at a D2. Finally, we get to social. We have 3 points to spend, with 2 points already trained into performance with edges for poetry lying in wait. While I'm tempted to specialize that performance into literary arts that includes poetry for edge and specialization, we should probably not commit our team leader that hard into that niche situation. Let's follow the smarts tactic and spread these in similar areas. Let's do a D2 in animal handling and streetwise to reflect the extremes of alertness and survival. We are almost done. Step 7 is describing our character. Let's go ahead and name them Robin. We've been using a plural pronoun throughout this, so let's keep that going with a they, them. We earned ourselves another language from hitting that 3 smarts, so let's add in Spanish. While they aren't from a bilingual home, maybe they grew up in a bilingual community, so they took some electives to help out. While Robin is a cynic, beauty is in the efforts of the individuals anyways. The 8th and final step is equipment. We already have our basic Rangers equipment from our role. Make sure that you have the information for your wrist communicator, power morpher, and weapons on your sheet. Depending on the type of weapon, you will use might, finesse, or targeting to attack with it, but you will also need to have all of the other traits recorded for references as well. For other gear, the long and the short of it is talking to your game master about what makes sense to have on you, from pocket knives to survival kits. The majority of your Ranger's gear will be provided to you through the story and the command center as the game master sees fit. There is the possibility of a wealth check to have a fancy car or the like, but the game never actually contextualizes what the difficulty levels of a wealth check are in context. In the end, it still comes down to your game master, so don't be afraid to at least have the conversation. Our character is now ready! As we go through adventures, the Game Master will decide how often we level up. The game does not have a set leveling system, so that will come down to your table. To level up, we will return to our roles Ranger chart to see what new powers they get, earn our Zords and other powers independent of our roles, and continue to increase our core stats as we go. The personal power of all Rangers will continue to scale based on the slow, moderate, and fast rate in the chart, ignoring the text below. Every level after first, we will gain a +1 in one of our essence scores, and therefore another skill or specialization. This follows a consistent cycle from levels 2 through 15. From 16 to 20, our essence bonuses will then alternate between our role's 2 primary essences. Now that we've built a character and learned from it, let's look through any final rules that will be useful to know in the very first session. The first sets of rules that we'll be looking at are for combat. Every episode of Power Rangers has at least 2 fights, right? The one to introduce the threat and a second to either finish them off or realize things are worse than anticipated. Combats will start with all participants making an initiative skill test. Don't forget the snag if you aren't trained. From highest to lowest, everyone will take their turns in the initiative order in a given round. Interestingly, this order is not permanent. Combatants can attempt to reset their initiative. After the first round of combat, so round 2 at the earliest, players can give up their move on their turn to re-roll initiative. If it is greater than their current score, they get to move to the new spot at the start of the next round. So really, the earliest anyone actually moves in the combat initiative in practice is the 3rd round. However, if this tactic is needed to make a plan work or to save a friend, go for it. I did say that resetting your initiative costs your move. Early on in the intro breakdown, I mentioned that your speed affects your action economy. Let's talk about that. The game splits actions up into move actions, standard actions, and free actions. A move action can be used to move your movement, or you can trade it in for a standard action. A standard action can be used to make one of these standard action options, or possibly be used on one of your perk powers. A standard may also be traded in for 2 free actions. Free actions are minor things. The rulebook gives a host of examples, from reloading a weapon to inputting a passcode, to even eating or drinking a single item. So, how many of these actions do you actually get? If your speed is 1, you get a move action on your turn. You can use it as such or trade it down to a standard or even 2 free actions. Either way, you're not doing much. If your speed is 2, you get a move and a standard. Finally, if your speed is 3 or above, you get your move and your standard with an additional free action for each step beyond 2. In short, move actions don't have to be used to move, standard actions aren't the default standard, and free actions aren't free, you have to earn them. So when I warned you that you wanted a minimum speed of 2, that's to make sure you got both the big actions. When I warned not to go to speed 5 or more unless that was your specific build, it's because you could be getting other things other than free actions for your points. Naturally, speed-focused builds like the yellow and pink Rangers will have a ton of free actions, but that's because you want a lot of points in for finesse and targeting. With that, let's talk about attack rolls. The 3 main skills you will use for attacking are Might, Finesse, and Targeting. Targeting is for ranged attacks. Might is the strength skill used for martial arts and most melee power weapons. Finesse is the speed skill used for martial arts and power weapons with the Finesse trait. The stats for unarmed martial arts are actually listed in the equipment weapons chart. The weapon attacks used for martial arts are divided into brawl and strikes, following the might finesse division. While almost completely the same, the difference in their alternate effects separates them. When you attack with a weapon, the weapon's effect tells you what happens on a success. It is usually a damage of a certain type. The type of damage can have a bunch of other effects. Alternatively, you can choose to use the weapon to attempt one of its alternate effects. This is something you have to choose before the roll because they usually have a downshift to your skill die to attempt the alternate effect, though it does change from effect to effect. When it comes to martial arts, both brawling with might or striking with finesse do 1 stun damage. Both brawling and striking can be used alternatively to do 1 blunt or a maneuver to grapple, shove, or trip. Brawling takes a downshift of 2 to do 1 blunt, but it has no shift to attempt a maneuver. Striking takes a downshift of 1 to do either the 1 blunt or the maneuver. This reflects striking's more practice in dangerous blows over brawling's overpowering but more clumsy assaults. Weapons such as the Blade Blaster use their effect and alternate effect to have one attack be melee and the other be ranged. Some weapons allow you to attack multiple targets with the alternate effect or use a powerful once per encounter ability. Damage types can make a big difference depending on who you're fighting. Sometimes enemies are immune to certain damage types, or they will affect the environment differently. An important one we have already mentioned is stun. Stun damage is the easiest damage to do when you are not morphed. Where pretty much all other damage types reduce an enemy's health, stun does not. Instead, hitting with a stun attack denies the target their move action on the next number of turns equal to the stun damage. If the number of turns stunned equals or exceeds their remaining health, the enemy falls unconscious and is defeated. Even if you don't defeat them this round, you are denying them one of their actions. If they have a speed of 1, they do nothing on their turn. If they have a greater speed, you have at least denied them their most variable action. Both hurting and stunning an enemy can defeat them. The difference is that when the rounds of stun go by, that damage is gone. Health damage is more permanent. Despite that, sometimes it's better to deny an enemy one of their attacks than it is to damage them this round. Usually, the faster an enemy dies, the better in an RPG. But if you find yourself with an injured ally or a bystander in harm's way, and don't think the enemy can be defeated this round, the stun may be worth it even if you're morphed. Speaking of defeated, what exactly entails defeated? The game is super loose with player and GM prerogative to determine what happens when a combatant reaches 0 health. The game hazards away from the ideas of death, but welcomes putties exploding into chunks, inklings fading away, and beasties getting warped back home the moment they reach 0 health. Major enemies may simply fall unconscious and be whisked away somehow. When a player character is defeated, it is up to the player and the GM to determine how bad it is and what happens. The technology and magics in the Power Rangers saga can reverse even death if necessary, so it's all about what you are drawn to. The important part of being defeated in the moment is determining if your character is still viable in the scene. They may be at 0 health, but able to come back if healed. Other times, they may need time, possibly just between this scene and the next, to be treated more extensively. It is important to remember that when a morphed ranger is defeated, they can be knocked out of their morphed form and instead be unconscious with 1 health. From there, an ally can use a standard action to rouse them. The difference between a long and short-term defeat for a Power Ranger will likely be narratively driven. Despite that, not all narrative is on a whim. Sometimes it is demanded by the dice. Whether it is a critical hit by an enemy or a fumble on your end, both demand the narrative alter to fit the heightened state. Fumbles are more common than critical hits. A fumble occurs when either a dice shift forces the skill die 3 below the single d20 base roll, or if you roll a 1 on the d20 and the skill test fails. The natural 1 does not guarantee the fumble, but if you roll a natural 1 and your skill dice is not enough to make it succeed, that is a fumble. On the chance that your skill dice allows your natural 1 to still beat the difficulty, you can escape the fumble. That said, you might want the fumble for the additional story point, or you may spend a story point to re-roll the fumble. Critical successes are a bit more rare. You can automatically critical hit by a dice shift that brings the skill die 4 above the maximum d12 skill die. That's not going to happen very often. Alternatively, you can roll a critical hit if all 3 conditions are met. 1, you succeed on the skill test. 2, your skill die is a d4 or higher. And 3, the skill die rolled its maximum value. Yes, while you can fumble on any given skill test, in order to crit, you must have at least 2 ranks in the chosen skill or had a die shift to accommodate. Even then, critical hits become less common the better your skill die is. Sure, you have a better bonus to your roll, but that improved success rate is bartered at a lower crit chance. For Game Masters, I have tips to help you along with your bad guys, or threats as the game calls them. The stat blocks are reduced like in most role-playing games, but they don't tell you how to approach missing information. Threats have the same action economy as players, but they don't have a listed speed. You'll have to look at their evasion stat and subtract 10 to determine their speed. They may have a handful of skills listed, but certainly won't have all of them. They can still attempt any skill, but will have a snag on it for being untrained. Out of the skills and attacks they do list, some of them have an asterisk next to the skill die. This is how you know they have specialization on the skill for whatever they're using it for. The game does not tell you this. This is my assumption, but we're kind of getting to the point of the video where I have to start making things up to make this rulebook work. There are a lot of things I haven't covered. Vehicles, Zords, size categories, advanced spectrum rangers. If there's demand for it, I will make a video to cover a lot of that stuff. For now, we've covered what you need to know to make a character and play through a few sessions to see if you like the Essence 20 system. To finish off this video, I want to walk you through some of the problems of the book to help you be able to figure things out on your own. First things first, you absolutely need the PDF version and you need the FAQ, whether as a downloaded PDF or just the website. I am a huge proponent of holding the physical copy of a book, but not in this case. If you don't have a search function, you will not find the information you need. More so, you may be looking for something that does not exist in the book. For instance, when we built our Black Ranger, the equipment it gave us was 1 versatile power weapon. If you make a Yellow Ranger, it gives you 2 light power weapons to choose. Versatile and light are not weapon categories or traits that the game actually uses. This is a holdover from when they were making this game as a 5th edition D&D spin-off before the executives decided they wanted a custom system for their fandom games that also include G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, and Transformers. The Black Ranger's level 1 and 2 abilities even reference long rests to regain their uses, but the long rest never appears anywhere else in the book. So, yeah, if you don't have a search function, you may not ever find the fact that what you're looking for doesn't even exist. Anyway, versatile and light weapons. The FAQ gives a description of what they would consider a light weapon to be, but the players just have to know that the capital L descriptive trait word means that you have to look it up in the FAQ. They do use the term sidearm as a subcategory, but don't correlate the two in the rules, and you can have a light weapon that isn't a sidearm. The Mighty Morphin Yellow Ranger's power daggers, which the weapons chart separates from the rest of the Mighty Morphin weapons, are considered a sidearm, which is what they want you to take. The versatile trait is worse. Searching the core rules, they hide the single quote versatile in the definition for hands. This implies that they wanted to use the versatile like they do in 5e to be a weapon that can be used with 1 or 2 hands, but the Black Ranger's power axe is not a 1 or 2-handed weapon. Looking at the FAQ, they define versatile as any weapon with 2 methods of wielding it. They focus on the 1 or 2 hands example, but won't commit, stating that it is just the most common version. It can also be weapons that mix melee and ranged options. The key thing is that they have an alternate effect when they attack in a different way. In this case, the Power Rangers Power Axe would count because it has the canon alternate weapon use. But I've got a secret for you. That's how this system is designed. 80% of the weapons have alternate effects, and that's not counting the brawling and striking that are also in the weapon chart. Some of them are switching hands, some are mixed weaponry, some are just melee weapons that can also throw sword beams. Where do you draw the line? I say don't. Talk to your game master, stomp the designer's desire to wiggle you into playing the Mighty Morphin Rangers out the window, and just choose a weapon appropriate for your stats. Like I said, break it down, have a breakdown. Not much of a difference. Okay, so the weapons are divided into availability groups with difficulty numbers to gain them, but give no context into how to use this. Do you ask for it at the command center? Do you roll when you want to summon a better weapon? Is there a smarts roll to make the better weapons? A level 1 character starts with a limited item at the very least, which isn't a 0 like the standard Blade Blaster or automatic martial arts. It's kind of the opposite of the wealth check, that it gives you your bonus depending on your arbitrary background without examples of what a difficulty 15 wealth check would be versus a 20 or 30. One of them give you standards, but no way of rolling for them. The other gives you your bonus, but doesn't tell you what it means. In addition to the weapons nonsense, there are other holdovers from the 5e Origins that cause problems. Like in 5th edition, having optional rules to trade in stat bumps, stat improvements for feats, they were also going to do that with the essence score improvements and the general perks. Instead, they chose to go the route of each role cycling through the essence bump each level, and then space out levels where you just get a general perk. They left the rules for the old system in the game. The FAQ is kind enough to let you know to delete those paragraphs from existence. The sample adventure in the book is okay, but it has its own problems as well. There are some minor spoilers, so skip ahead if you want to know nothing. The adventure makes assumptions about the kinds of things the players will want to do to find information they need to continue forward. There is a major focus on sneaking into places to hack into computer systems to look at records and stuff, but unless prompted to do so, I'm not sure how many players would think of that as the main path forward. There's also one moment that a bad guy has a power to call in backup, but he has to make a skill test to do so. He has a D4 with specialization, but instead of him using technology or something, they phrase it as a cleverness skill test versus difficulty 11. When cleverness is a defense score, it tells you the skill die he has, so you can just play through rolling the dice and seeing if he hits an 11, but it also felt like they wanted to make it about the players picking up on what he was doing with his attack roll, either fooling someone or being able to catch him in the act. That gets weird because if you have a bunch of rangers present, do you attack all of them? You could target the nearest ranger under the idea that the closest one would be able to stop him if they're clever enough to pick up on what he's doing. Either way, make an attack on the nearest player or just roll the specialized D4 versus the difficulty 11. You can do it how they are telling you to do it. You can try and follow what the game's actual design is. It's a small thing, but it's something weird to be on the lookout for, and be on the lookout for if you have any other pre-written adventures that may be messing up their own rules. The rest of the adventure is generally fun and easy enough to adapt to the player's desires in the moment if you know the story. There's a wacky villain in line with the shows and some weird mechanics that have a chance to highlight the difference between damage types on the small chance that they actually come up. With those pseudo-kind words, we are wrapping up our introduction to the Power Rangers role-playing game. The game itself has potential to be decent. The problem is in the presentation and the editing of the rulebook. This game exists and is advertised on hype alone. Actually trying to put together a comprehensive guide to the game taught me why one doesn't exist already. Hopefully, this video makes it easier for you to play the game if it interests you. Please drop any corrections you have in the comments below, and let me know if there are any other awfully edited games you want me to cover, or if you want a part 2 to this video with the rules section I left out. I probably won't do it, but with enough peer pressure, who knows what can happen.